Welcome to the Contagious Code Podcast, where we dive deep into code, learn practical skills, celebrate the beauty of engineering, and eliminate imposter syndrome.
I'm Tejas Kumar, and I've been building on the web for over 20 years at companies like Spotify, Vercel, Zeta, and more. Today, I'm joined by my friend and colleague Atila Fassina. Atila is a senior developer experience engineer at CrabNebula, a company specialized in and around the Tauri ecosystem, offering consulting, security audits, and products to help developers. Atila is also a member of the SolidJS ecosystem team. SolidJS, for those who aren't familiar, is a library for building user interfaces, like React. However, unlike React, where when state updates, a function component is re-invoked along with all of its children, SolidJS makes use of, and honestly has caused a resurgence in, functional reactive properties, or observable functional values called signals. And so in SolidJS, when state updates, function components are never called. Instead, the places where those reactive properties are read, only that place, that text, that number, whatever changes in place. And so in SolidJS, re-renders are never a thing, and therefore it is faster and somewhat arguably smaller than React. We go into detail about all of this in this episode. We also go into detail about CrabNebula, Tauri, building desktop applications with JavaScript, and much more. I will notify you that somewhere like around 36 minutes into the video, into the audio, my audio quality somehow gets doubled. I've done my best in terms of audio engineering to resolve that, but that weird doubling of audio is momentary and does not last the entire episode, thank goodness. So if you're willing to tough it out, I'd appreciate that. I'm also aware that this is an issue and would try to resolve it in future episodes. This podcast, comes with costs. It is not free. However, we offer it to all of you for free. So to manage the costs, we have sponsors. If you'd like to sponsor the podcast, consider sending an email to podcast@tejas, that's tejas.qa. More information about that in the show notes. For now, let's take a moment to acknowledge our sponsor and then get into the discussion. This episode is sponsored by Orama Search. Orama Search is the fastest developer way to build a search engine that is also an extremely fast search engine. It's built by my friend Michele Riva, formerly at Nearform, and is built entirely in JavaScript and is honestly the fastest search engine and developer tool to build search engines around. Orama Search makes use of and offers a number of different search functionalities like full text search, vector search, geo search, etc., and is available for free for hobbyists and enthusiasts. So we'd invite you to check that out at oramasearch.com. That's ORAMA search.com. Thank you, Orama Search, for sponsoring this episode. And now for my discussion with Atila. Atila, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, man.
I have to tell you, I've been looking forward to this for so long. A nice contagious code chat. You're the first guest.
Oh, I'm so honored. Yeah, I've been looking like since the first time you told me about this. It was what, a month and a half ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been excited about it.
I'm a little bit ashamed because I was supposed to not to have you as a guest, but I'm a little bit ashamed because I was supposed to launch this on January 8th, and today is not January 8th.
Yeah,
I'm a bit late, partially because of the German tax office and having bureaucracy and so on. If these sound like excuses, they're totally excuses. Anyway, without getting too much into that, I'm so excited. We have so much to talk about. SolidJS, huge developments there. I want to get your thoughts, your journey, and also I want to capture how people can get involved. I think you're part of the ecosystem team. We'll talk more about that.
Yep.
And so part of that, I assume, is building an ecosystem. So I want to dive into that a lot. Also, CrabNebula. I think you started somewhat recently, 6 months ago or something like this.
Yeah, a little bit less than that.
So it'd be nice to hear about Rust, Tauri, the whole ecosystem, Smashing Magazine. There's so much we could talk about. But before we do any of that, let's start with SolidJS.
Okay.
You've been really active in SolidJS. Last year, gosh, you most of your talks are Solid talks. I
really went all in on that. So the thing to me is, well, you and I have both been very active on the tech community, and I think you would agree with me that there was a lot of changes happening in 2023.
Yeah.
On frameworks, on like governance and stuff like that. And then I was a React developer for like biggest part of my career, I'd say. And then at some point, I started having questions and doubts, and it wasn't really doing it for me at this point. So I started, and we were working together, so you kind of watched me doing that. Like I started like brainstorming and trying to find other things that would really answer the question. And then there was this BJ, no, I think what was React Brussels, I think. Ryan spoke, we were both there. And we had like very long conversations with Ryan, with Mishko, even from Quick. And it's something about Solid like clicked for me, like the way that Ryan would describe his ideas for the future and strategy and stuff like that. It kind of made sense.
Yeah.
And since then, I've been kind of preparing myself to go all in on that. And then I got close to David DiBiase, which is the community manager, part of the Solid core team as well. And when I joined CrabNebula, it was when things start getting all coming together, because CrabNebula is one of the main partners of Tauri. It's a company created by the founders of Tauri. And if you never heard of Tauri, it's an open source framework for building hybrid or even native apps with web technologies. And there's a lot between Tauri and Solid and how they do community that makes sense and it's similar. So the same things that brought me to CrabNebula are the things that brought me to Tauri, to SolidJS as well.
Interesting.
And then one thing just retrofit the other, and here we are. So I'm enjoying putting both of them together.
That's awesome. You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
doubts and things with React. Things didn't quite make sense. I see some of that. I mean, I see a lot of people complaining about things like use memo. David Khurshid, our friend, has a really good talk called Use What, W-A-T, and it's just this complete satire. I'm curious if you could speak to some of those doubts and questions around React that then, sort of paved the way for getting into SolidJS.
Yeah. So the first thing to me was I was questioning a little bit the whole VDOM paradigm and stuff like that, but also there was a big push on going with React server components, and there was a nice tweet from there was a nice tweet recently that asked like what's the framework that's the most anti-React, and the answer was so nice because we brought from I think Ryan answered that, and it was a really nice answer that captured the whole like journey of React, where the most anti-React framework is React itself. Like React today is completely against React 10 years ago. And I felt that this journey kind of happened a little bit like the last few months or this past year. It happened very quickly in terms of, okay, we're shifting the whole paradigm. SPAs are now evil. We're going full on React server components, but here you go. Like it's not ready yet, but let's use that framework with this unstable technology and go for it. It's going to be great. Just trust me. And I'm the kind of guy that asks a lot of whys. And at some point I felt my whys were not entirely being answered. And I didn't feel that much like drive to get involved or even like, I don't know, suggest anything at some point. And then as I was looking, I mentioned like SolidJS had a model that spoke to me. Like I think that Signals is really great. I'm not the only one. A lot of frameworks are doing Signals, all of them except React at this point, I think. And I think they're a great model to describe how the DOM works. And at that point, when I chose, I knew very little about it, very little about the observer pattern and what actually meant it. I knew much less than I do now, and I think that I still haven't got the full picture about how it plays it, how it prevents, I don't know, state tearing, for example, and things like that. But I do like the how signals can describe the DOM, and I think it's there for and I think the whole traction that it got recently is well justified. Even if you consider that even TC39 is considering adding signals to
What,
this
really?
spec. There is a proposal to have signals as a vanilla JavaScript feature. So
Would that kill SolidJS?
I wouldn't say it would kill, because even frameworks where they use signals, they have different flavors of signals. There are frameworks that go all the way there that use, but there are other frameworks, for example, Quick, I think is the best example of that. You use signals in Quick, but then if at any point you fumble, like you fall out of reactivity, as we say, where you do something that causes your data to be untracked unintentionally, Quick can actually identify that and force a big re-render. So you get a performance degradation in very big quotes, because probably your user is never going to notice.
Yeah.
But like you're less fine grained, but you still your app still works. While in Solid, intentionally, it's very strict about fine granularity. So Solid has a bunch of helpers to assist you in maintaining the fine grained reactivity and protecting it. But once you fail one of the best practices, or you unintentionally fall out of reactivity, you're going to notice very quickly, because your UI is going to stop updating.
Right.
And I think that's a reason why, like, I don't know very much about this spec, about how it's going to be. It's not going to be that fast because it's JavaScript. It needs to be a little bit slower, because there's a lot of legacy. There's a lot of things we cannot break. And even when it comes, there's going to be a story there for frameworks to decide how much they're going to buy into that or not.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a really good point. If signals were added to JavaScript, according to this proposal, then I guess SolidJS would still continue to succeed, not succeed, but exist, according to the fact that it is not just a signal library, but it also is it has a whole effect layer that will then bind those signals to the DOM, right?
Yeah.
So Solid is not just signals, it's signals plus DOM. And so the DOM part would still
yes, and especially with SolidStart approaching stability, there's going to be like this full stack framework built around the ecosystem, and using the ecosystem in a way, because I don't know about lines of code for the meta frameworks. I can tell you that SolidStart's pretty small. Like at this point, it's like 1,500 lines.
What?
Yeah.
A framework in 1,500 lines of code?
Because it's entirely standing on top of the community. So the server side, the server runtime is Nitro, so it's not Solid. The serializer is Serval, which is another library, then it's not SolidStart. The router is SolidRouter, which is not part of SolidStart. So that allows SolidStart to be extremely thin, and therefore it's on top of the whole ecosystem. And that's, I think, the main difference between, in terms of mindset, between what the Solid community stand for and a lot of the other ones. There's different degrees of opinions that comes with frameworks. Like even within React, you can go for like Redwood, that brings the whole kitchen sink for you.
Yeah.
Next.js, a little bit less, but they bring up, they have the whole bundler.
Yeah.
And then you have Remix, which is a little bit less. So there's different degrees of that. Like, and then you go outside of this, you have Quick, which has a lot of opinions as well. But then you go for Nuxt or Analog, for example, in Angular and Vue. So there are different sides of that, but SolidStart goes very intentionally on the whole end of the spectrum again, where it says we're not going to have opinions. You bring your own opinions.
You bring your own opinions by composing different things from the ecosystem.
By being able to either decide not to use something that SolidStart would suggest or not. For example, if you want to set up a SolidStart app right now, it's going to come with the whole settings. But then there is this project called Vinci, which is again another thin wrapper around Nitro and Vite. What Vinci is going to do is allow you to create create an app where you're going to define the 3 routers. So in a full stack application, you have 3 routings. You have one for static, which is basically where you're going to put your static resources, or namely the public folder usually. And then you have the server side where your server is going to be able to define which route is going to go. And then you have the client side, because once you hydrate or once you reach the browser, you become an SPA. What Vinci allows you to do is independently declare each router and how it's going to handle for each one of those routers and what's going to be the entry point.
Interesting.
So essentially, if you have a Solid app and you're using something like, I don't know, 10-stack router, which is arguably the best client-side router today, you can define, okay, so there's my entry point, here's my my interoperability layer, here's the bridge between that, here's how I'm going to handle the routes on the client side, and that's going to use 10-stack router, that's not going to use Solid router. That's fine. That's going to work. If you want to have some different kind of backend that's not based on Nitro, you can as well.
Interesting.
Potentially, you could even, I don't know how much effort it's going to be, but potentially you could even have something that's not Node.js in the backend.
Wow.
If you define what's going to be the router and what's going to be the entry point, you can just have like a very thin JavaScript layer that's going to connect to whatever else.
Wow. So the Solid ecosystem, it sounds like is pretty rich. I always thought one of Solid's drawbacks was there's no ecosystem compared to React. I mean, React, there's a million different libraries. There's probably a million being made right now. But it sounds like it's coming and it's maybe already there.
I think it's catching a lot of traction, especially as of late, because like this week even I tweeted something about like, okay, if you want to build something with Solid, there's three libraries you can use. So there's Cobalt and Corvu, which Cobalt's a little bit older. Corvu is very recently built by another person in our in the SolidJS documentation team, and so both of them are basically Radix UI alternatives. If you're from so you have like headless components, they're accessibility friendly and maintain best practices, and you can just drop in and use. You have Tailwind ways of integrating with Tailwind and so on. And recently, 2 people in our community got together and they ported Shadcn UI to Solid.
Wow.
So you have Solid UI now. And then I tweeted those 3. I said, look, you can pick one of those 3 and build something. And then Grizzly just tweeted back to me saying, look, I have Arc UI and Park UI, which are also support Solid. So it was another one that was completely off my radar. And it's a huge one, and it's been stable for quite a while.
Wow.
So you have a lot of choices to do that with Solid. We also, because Solid's a very thin layer of abstraction on top of the DOM, it becomes a little bit easier, I would say, to create this kind of libraries. And intentionally, Ryan decided to learn from all the other frameworks. So one thing that he believed, and I agree with him, that React did very right was the JSX choice. So depending on how simple your component is, if you look at 2 React and SolidJS components, you cannot tell the difference. And that allows you to port at very least the syntax of a component. Then again, if you go under the hood, they behave completely different. So you need to understand both frameworks to do a portability. But it is possible, and it kind of helps. So every year we have this Solid Hack, which is basically a hackathon where people get together and either create a solution for the Solid ecosystem or port a solution or create a nice app. And there's some awards involved, prizes involved, and that's something that we use to like retrofeed the project and also nurture the community. So yeah, I'd say it's catching a lot of traction recently.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, I think a year ago this time there was no Corvu, there was no all of these projects you mentioned just didn't exist.
I think Cobalt existed.
Okay.
Because it's actually a product of one of the solid hacks. I don't remember if it was 2022 or 2023.
Okay.
But it is a product of one of those, and it's been there for a while. It's been quite stable. We use that in CrabNebula in both projects we have, and it's working really well, I would say.
So great. So solid hack, you would say doing like for growing an ecosystem, and I'm not talking just now for SolidJS. I'm assuming that there's a listener who maybe is involved in some ecosystem, maybe the Angular ecosystem, React, something. Maybe it's not even like an open source project. Maybe it's something internally, right? And they want to grow their ecosystem. They want to get new contributions. Would you then say having something like Solid Hack, some type of hackathon, is helpful?
I'd say it's been extremely helpful to Solid. I think Dave can speak more of that because he's essentially been organizing that for a few years. I'm just in this 2024, that's where I started helping. But it does help a lot. It has enabled us to not only create more solutions for the community, but also bring the community together. Because then people say, oh, look, I'm building this in public, and then somebody else comes in and help. Like that's essentially how I got involved with Solid. That's how I got involved with the Solid docs. For example, we're rebuilding again the documentation for the Solid.
Why?
So the Solid needed better docs, and then sometime last year they started creating it again, and then there was a little bit of drama involved. And then the project got a little bit all over the place. Sarah has been her handler in Twitter is Lady Blue Notes. She's been doing a great work in keeping the boat afloat. And then at some point I started like suggesting some stuff, and I said, look, I think we can get to a nicer architecture for this docs and push this through. And she was very open to it, and I did like a POC in about a weekend or so. She liked where it went. Then Jason came in and started helping as well. Daniel Afonso came in, started helping as well. And it's almost done. I don't want to say makes me afraid of saying almost done, but yeah, we're very close to shipping it. With that, we're gonna have a very nice new docs, which is gonna be using the new SolidStart that's right now in beta, with all the fancy features. We even built like collections for it, like Astro collections. We have Solid collections inside.
What's collections?
So collections, Astro, like if you work with, like you have ways of creating collections. There, you can make type safe definitions in your documents, either as data or as in Markdown. You can define like front matter, and then that is validated with Zod, which is a runtime type checking library for JavaScript. And by doing that, you have runtime checks on how your documents are defined, like Markdown. You can essentially, and then it wraps it up in collections, and then you can have each entry defined like wherever their metadata is, and you can essentially have them in a type safe way. You can create type safe content.
But can Markdown not be type safe? I mean, it's all just text, no?
But the metadata can not be.
Okay, so it's type safety for metadata. Okay.
It's type safe for metadata.
So you can then verify that the published date is actually a date.
I can verify that the date is in a certain format. I can verify that every doc has a title. I can verify that every entry has an image. I can verify that the links exist.
Nice.
And the relations are there, or something like that.
You can even verify probably that a link is not broken.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So what we're doing, we do slightly different. Ironically, I was a little bit more opinionated than Astro. So what I did is I created these collections tailored for the docs. So what we do essentially is create the home map of the docs on build time. And that allows us to define all the relation and the order of the sidebar and different sections and stuff like that. And so it's pretty interesting. And yeah, I'm excited about that.
Awesome.
To be honest.
Awesome. You know what I'm hearing? I'm hearing like we're having this conversation, right? But I'm hearing another level, like a meta conversation here about how because you mentioned earlier with React, you were a React developer, and I mean you still probably write React somewhere. But things started changing. They started moving away from SPAs to the server, and it seemed very almost gate kept. Is that fair to say? Gate kept.
I think so. I think it is fair.
And so part of this meta conversation is, okay, but the SolidJS community isn't gatekept. In fact, I can almost hear you say, I could actually play in this community. I could actually contribute. I was included. Whereas React, maybe not. And this I find very interesting because you're not the first person who's mentioned this. I think the React code base is just absolutely not possible to contribute to. Like if you wanted to do like a docs POC, and what was it, Blue Notes? What's her handle?
Lady Blue Notes.
Lady Blue
yes.
Notes. What's her name?
Sarah Gerard.
Sarah Gerard. So if you, I think Rachel Neighbors was this person for the React docs.
Yeah.
And I don't know that if you made a POC, and we both know Rachel. Rachel's awesome. But if you made a POC, I don't know how that would land, right? Because there's so many more layers. Because Facebook.com uses this, and WhatsApp, and Instagram, and
yeah. And to be honest, I think that's not pinnable to a single person. I know that's not what you tried to say. Rachel would do the best effort ever to get people to contribute. Like that's just how they are. For everything. I just think that probably it's because React is such a big ecosystem. It needs to be more bureaucratic to a certain point.
Do you think so? Because like I
think it could be that, but I mean, I think the gatekeeping, that would not justify calling it gatekeeping. I think what becomes a gatekeeping is where we start playing with dogmas. Like when somebody says, yeah, SPAs are evil, you shall never use SPAs. Because, and it speaks volumes to how open source became a business. We need to touch that point if we're going to talk about React, because every single framework around React and React itself is built from within companies. Where it's not and companies have interests. That's okay, and that's fine. The thing is, it becomes tricky, and you can say, oh, but Ryan works at Netlify. Yes, and Rich Harris works at Vercel, but I don't think Svelte has that kind of invested interest. I don't feel that from the Svelte community, for example. And the same way I don't feel like that from the Solid community. I don't think Netlify has like any skin in the game when it comes to deciding what SolidJS is going to look like. I think from what I talked to Ryan, it's been his very strong position that I mean, like, you were there when we talked to him, and it does feel that he started SolidJS because it was his pet project. He wanted to see that happening. I think when I was in his live stream, he even mentioned, like, because I have this talk about that I put together, like, every framework not using signals, and then Ryan shows up with Solid and said, look, I love signals. Knockout was on the right place. It didn't work for other reasons. Let's have it. And now everybody has it. And Ryan just started laughing when he saw that and said, if I knew there was a chance other frameworks would adopt signals, I would went there and contributed to them. That's just how he operates. And I think if there's any point interest start deviating from his view on Solid, he's just gonna, I need to pivot that. I need to do something else. So yeah, that's the gatekeeping for me. It's when we start working with absolutes in terms of SPAs are bad or server components are the way to go. And I think server components are a step towards the right direction. I don't like the idea of saying that if you're not using server components, you're doing it wrong in any way. But yeah,
I think coming back to these open source projects being backed by for-profit companies and React, the reason probably I feel like you wouldn't have been able to do this proof of concept style contribution to React, which, just so I understand correctly, this wasn't like I'm going to add a section to the docs. It was I'm going to change the architecture of the docs.
Yeah, I deleted the whole app and started again.
Okay. I'm just like, I'm laughing because to think about doing this to the React docs, it just seems impossible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the reason it is impossible is because, yes, React is big and it has a huge ecosystem. I don't think that necessarily needs to be a big hurdle, because then you could say, if you do your job right and SolidJS has this enormous ecosystem, then some future Attila down the line will not be able to open a proof of concept like that on the
Yeah.
Solid docs in the future. I don't think that's true. I think the reason it's so hard to contribute to React is because it's owned by Facebook and Vercel,
Yeah.
or Meta and Vercel, and it has to serve them first. And so the docs have to serve them first. And you're not them. Kitsa likes to remind us, we're not Facebook. And so it needs sort of that okay, right? And it needs to serve all of that first. Do you think that may have something to do with it?
I think it does. I think it, like, I would be naive to say it doesn't. Like, we have Flow.js to say how
Right.
things like that can happen. If you're fresh to the ecosystem, or if you haven't heard about Flow.js,
It's because it's dead.
it was the TypeScript competitor at some point. Like, literally competitor. It was like polarized completely. And then at some point, Facebook at the time, before they called Meta, decided, oh, Flow needs to serve Facebook, and that's it. We're gonna consider proposals, but we're not gonna implement anything that's not towards our best interest. And that's how Flow disappeared and exists only inside Meta now. But just circling back to the thing about deleting a whole app's architecture and starting over, I didn't do that like out of the blue, showed up to Sarah and said, look, I have a PR. We had a conversation about like what was the vision for the docs to that point. Dave was also involved, which was a conversation within the ecosystem team where like we talked about pain points of the current version of the architecture, what we wanted to do. I made a few suggestions, and then we agreed on a timeline. So I went out on a weekend, I came back with a POC to show it off, and then that's the moment where she said, okay, you're on the right track. And then Jason came in, did a few other changes, and that's where the pull request came to be. So it was not a solo effort.
Yeah.
It was not this weird random guy that went away and came back with a cowboy hat and changed everything.
Yeah.
There was a lot of reasons behind that. That's a talk for a whole complete different.
Okay, so if you replay those events in the React ecosystem,
I don't think that would play out. Yeah.
Interesting. But I mean, why not? Like, if it was a discussion with the team, with the core team, hey, you want to improve the docs? I have some ideas, and then and then there was a proof of concept after. I sort of see it working out when you put it that way.
I think it was. I think there was a chance to work, but if I remember right, and maybe I don't, but if I remember right, when the new docs came around, a few people like within Facebook at the time, they went away for a few weeks or months, and then they came back with an RFC, which somebody said in a previous like discussion panel I was in, maybe it was you, that the RFCs are usually, or maybe it was, I think it was Mark Erickson. Yeah. So the thing was basically the RFCs are, here it is, you can say your thoughts and we'll consider it.
Yeah, this was Mark.
So, but this is our idea. This is where we're going towards, unless you have a very resounding argument why we should not. Yeah. So that's my take, and that's fundamentally different, not only from Solid. I'm not trying to put them as opposites, but like Astro is a good example of how they do that. And Astro is behind a company as well, and they have their whole like democratic system about how to handle this kind of suggestions and interference within the Astro open source project. So I think there's a way of going that way. I don't think it's probably in the React's core team best interest to do that.
Right. Because they have to serve so many masters.
Probably that, or probably because they're best productive in that way, or because that's just a way that's been working for them.
Right.
Like, we remember when they first showed React and the kind of heat they got from it. Yeah. I think it's natural that somebody would, like, I don't know, protect themselves a little bit more.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that experience still exists because the team kind of renew itself
Yeah.
a lot. But I remember when I saw the first on-click there, and everybody said, "Oh, that's a sin. That's a capital sin."
Now they're doing that with server actions, right? On-click, use server.
Yeah.
What is that?
We have server action solid, by the way.
What?
Yes.
Since when?
Yeah, it's since forever.
Okay.
So I don't know. Maybe Solid's not even the first one to have server actions, but yeah, we do have, and they're quite powerful and nice. It's surprisingly similar.
Interesting. We need to get into the details of that in just a minute. But I do want to pause here and ask a very silly question, because we have been talking about Solid, we've been talking about fine-grained reactivity, etc. If somebody has been listening so far, and now they're interested in Solid, they see a rising tide ecosystem, they want to get involved, but they're still struggling to wrap their head around like fine-grained reactivity and the value proposition of Solid. What's the best way to understand it? You could give an action, like go read the docs, or you could try and answer it yourself in a sentence, ELI5 style, whatever you want.
Yeah, I'll try to ELI5 that, and then I can say that we have a video in the solidjs.com. If you go, there's like a 5-minute video that explains in a very superficial way how the whole subscribing and signal system works. But essentially, like Signals is a way of push and pull data. So the way, if you're familiar with React, the way that state works is essentially a pull data. So every time you want to define, you want to use a state, you need to pull that data in, you store that data as a reference, and that's how it works. With Signal, you have a push and pull. So the data can actually let a system, I would say, know that they changed. And that's why if you see the syntax, it's a function call, because that value doesn't really exist as a reference at that specific place. What happens that every time you read that, that's going to be pulling from the actual data source. So
what is the data source? Where does it live?
In this case is wherever your data is living. It's going to basically execute a function that defines the data. That can be something inside a store, that can be some piece of logic in your code, essentially. So that data is brought live there. And that's why it's so easy, especially if you're coming from React, to kind of fall out of this reactivity kind of thing. Because we are used to storing data as reference in React, because the whole component's going to re-render, so everything runs again, and that's it. Like, nobody sees any evil in that. Because if the logic is cheap, then you can render cheaply. The thing is with React that there's no re-renders. They're just not a concept. Yes, sorry. The thing with Solid is that there are no re-renders. So whenever you execute a logic in a function, it's gonna be there forever. And then if you're gonna use a signal getter, you use on the JSX, and that's where you get the value always live within your JSX. So once you break that concept and wrap your head around that, I believe it becomes way more predictable,
right,
as a developer, to reason about how your app works. So then again, circling back in a one sentence, I would say it's a way to define an observer that's gonna let all subscribers of a piece of data to know, regardless of where they are. So it's a tracking system.
It's a I like that. So you went from like 3 sentences to 1 sentence to like a tracking system. That's brilliant. Let me say back to you what I heard, and you can tell me if it's right or wrong. So with React, function components that are stateful, when the state updates, the entire component renders. The state update does not notify the component like, hey, I changed, but instead the function is just called, right? And this is why some people say React is not reactive.
Yep.
Because it's not. It's just a function being called again. It's not reacting to anything. However, in Solid, the function component, so like a form, will never re-render. So this function will return JSX, and that's it. It will never be called again. But if there's a reactive property from a signal inside this function, then a signal will note. This is where I'm lost. Who notifies the component when the signal changes?
So you have an effect-based system.
Okay.
So within Solid, what happens is it's basically a set that's gonna store. Basically, that's probably an oversimplification. Ryan would slap me in the face if he heard me saying that. But there is a list of effects to be run whenever a signal is called.
And this is just like in the global scope, somewhere managed by Solid.
It's managed by Solid,
Nice.
and then every time the signal is called, it has the subscriber list.
Okay.
And then it says, okay, now these are the people that need to know that I'm updating. And then all the effects get run again. So it's essentially, it's an effect-based system. And the way that this is positioned at Odds, it brings me to another thing that a lot of people ask. Okay, so what's gonna happen when React gets signals? I don't think it ever will. And that's because of it, because React is mental model is entirely based on re-rendering stuff.
Yeah.
And once you break out of that mental model with the fine-grained stuff, with the subscribing system, with the data handling itself,
Yeah.
you open yourself for something that's really nasty to debug, which is called state tearing. So state tearing, to summarize in very simple terms, it's when different pieces of your UI have different states for that same, different values for the same state. For example, go to GitHub and then you see the count of pull requests, and then you merge a pull request and the count doesn't update. But then you have one less pull request in the list. So that's state tearing. That's where you say you have 7 pull requests, but you actually have a list of 6. And in order for you to have fine-grained reactivity within React, you need to break out of the rendering model. If you break out of the rendering model, there's going to be an island of data handling itself, but at the same way, there's going to be the whole other part that might be using the same data that depends on the re-rendering. And then if you dodge a re-rendering at some point, you get some stale data somewhere or something like that.
So it sounds like it's an all or nothing thing. Either React completely abandons the whole non-reactive re-rendering model in favor of signal-style reactivity, or it doesn't. But there's no hybrid, is what I'm hearing.
I don't think there's a hybrid, because it's like there are people that have used hybrids. I've heard people using svelte runes in a React app. I heard people doing rendering Solid and React in the same app without not in a micro front end kind of context. In this case, for that particular person, it's because they're migrating, but the svelte runes and Solid and React, it's a very real thing. It is possible, but I think you're just breaking out of a mental model, and that just creates this island of complexity that at some point you're looking at your document, you're looking at your component tree, and you need to understand that that component's a special snowflake that's going to render differently. So it just creates a lot of implicit complexity in your code, and that's hurtful for teams. So I don't think, and also the reacting, when Signals got a lot of traction, they were very adamant in saying, no, we don't think Signals is the way to describe the UI. And that's fair. That's their take. I don't agree that it's like an implementation detail, but that's just like how they think is best, and who am I to say they're wrong?
I mean, just for context for those listening, it's the React team made it clear that they didn't think Signals was the right approach to get fine-grained reactivity, because their argument is React is a DX tool. React is you're supposed to give React JSX declaratively, like, this is my component, this is how I want it to update. I want to call it set state, and I don't care if you use Signals or if you use some compile magic. I set my state, that's it. And this is why they say, okay, but then if you have to reason about Signals, you're reasoning about some internal detail that they think shouldn't matter for you. Right? Whereas with Solid, Ryan's like, no, it's fine. Developers are fine. They can reason about it.
And I think that's like a very oversimplification, and that's just like leaning on your huge community. For example, if the way that if the VDOM and stuff like that was just an implementation detail, there would not be libraries like 10-stack table, for example, React table, or
Wait, sorry. The VDOM is an implementation detail.
because in my opinion, implementation detail would be something that you would be able to abstract away from the developer that's the user.
Yes, the VDOM is abstracted away from developers.
I mean, the whole model of that,
Right.
that it comes out because of because we have the whole re-rendering model based on the VDOM. It's how
Right.
you need to have the re-rendering in order to have the VDOM, because you need to do the dirty checking and then re-render the whole thing.
Yes.
So that's what I meant. And if that wasn't, if we need to write code for that rendering model to actually work the way we want, it stops being an implementation detail. If I need to be clear about, okay, I'm gonna render this 1,000 rows table, and then I need to bring something in. I need to very aggressively memorize. I need to learn this. I need to learn that.
Then
it stops being implementation detail, because it starts playing a role in your mind space. In you need to write code for your code, and then that's not something.
Or write code for your framework. Like the counter argument to that is use memo and use callback, and using them at the right time and place. This isn't declarative DX anymore. Use memo is imperative. It's called use memo, and indeed the memoization itself is handled by React, but the fact that you're even calling use memo makes it less declarative, right? Because and what I like is the React team admits that, but they still won't take on signals, and they're doing this thing with forget, which is this compiler that magically memoizes everything that should be memoized. And it works based on the rules of React. So you're not supposed to mutate props. Props are read only. All of that. I find this whole discourse super interesting, because everybody is solving the same problem around performance. But then there's the whole group of people on the internet. I think of Kitze, for example, who just says, dude, it doesn't matter. Like, you're saving milliseconds. Does it even matter? What's your take on that?
My take is that I think it does matter, but not from a point of you're gonna either do, or it's gonna work or it's gonna break kind of matter. It does matter in terms of understanding how things operate, understanding how your code works, and essentially becoming a better developer. Because if we would just settle for whatever is working, we'd probably still be using jQuery. A good example from that is the financial system, where some countries decided to stay for what is working, and they're still writing checks, or things like that. Or like bank transfers, like in Germany, that takes two days to complete. So like, it works, and then I can ship with that. It's not enough all the time. I do understand that there are a group of people that go all the way around it, and then they just, okay, for esoteric purposes, or for doing something that's hype or that I like, I'm gonna go all the way out, and they stop caring about UX, and that I think is wrong. But the whole exercise of improving and pushing it forward, and creating something more performant, and shaving off some seconds or not, or something like that, it's a nice exercise, and it's good. It makes us evolve as a community. I wouldn't say that a micro optimizations are reasons. Like, when people come to me and say, look, oh, Solid is so cool and it's so fast, and should I migrate? I said, I think you should, but not because it's faster. Because you can write very fast React code. That's not a problem. The thing is, what actually makes it easier for you to reason about? What's actually make it easier for you to onboard someone? Or what actually responds better for your team? Like at CrabNebula, we have a group of people. They're like, they're okay with paying the pioneer tax, where, oh, we need to we need to integrate a library to Solid and there's nobody that integrated it yet, we're okay of going there and building it. We're okay of jumping into the ecosystem and creating a solution for it or finding out a best practice. And that's okay. And we're fine with that. We weren't fine when we used a different framework before. It didn't solve for us for other reasons, and wasn't React in this case. We chose out of that for our own reasons, and then we were fine paying this tax with Solid. So it does depend on whatever floats your boat. That's essentially what I meant about when I said it's okay when people disagree, and that's fine. Like you do what you gotta do to be a better developer in the end and to shape a better product.
I like that. And also I think it's worth mentioning, you know, a lot of skeptics are going to ask, why does it matter? These are tiny improvements, but I guess the response to that is, why not? Right? Like, look, you're building something, it's using JSX, it looks exactly like what people know, React, and so why not? Like, they don't even have to do any work. So why sit and complain? I see a lot of this on X, and I'm just like, look, man, why not? You're building something, it's pushing developers towards a pit of faster success. What's the problem with that? I think maybe
even if you don't have, even like in the very least of the cases, like the brain is a muscle, you're exercising it. So let people play around, let people create proof of concepts, let people get excited about tech. It's nice. Wouldn't it be so boring if we weren't excited about the work we do?
Yeah. I mean, the reason I even asked this question is because I think of people, what's his name, dude? There's this like Levelzio, right? Like PHP, jQuery, making $100,000 a month on recurring revenue. What? And so, you know, he's the strong case for like, who cares? Just use jQuery, just write checks, do your 1 week bank transfer. It's fine. And there's like, he's got disciples now because everybody wants that 100K MRR, you know? Yeah, but I think I sort of agree with you. I think just like, let's land on why not.
And I think the amount of money somebody makes out of a product defines if they're a great business person or not. Doesn't define if they're a great developer or not.
So good.
So, I mean, if that's fine with you, like you can make millions like with stock trading. You can do millions with whatever you want. Like, why are you writing developer tools then? Why are you doing this? Why? Who cares? You know, like I think we should not benchmark a turtle for how well they climb trees, and I think we should not benchmark developers of how much money they make. Of course, we don't do this for free.
Well, it's more the tools with which he makes the money. There's that
which is fine. It's the tools that he's most productive with.
Exactly.
Like, that's okay.
And you could, so I mean, to state a corollary to that, you could very easily make 100K MRR with SolidJS too. It's just whatever you're comfortable with, right?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Like, let's just use vanilla JavaScript because I don't know, Hacker News is vanilla. They do.
Hacker News is the best website because it's so minimal. It's so minimal. I love it. Reddit used to be like this before it became whatever it is now. But discussion for another time. SolidJS is awesome. I'm convinced. I've been convinced for a long time because of you and Daniel, and Ryan and David and Dan, and I could just list off names. But it sounds like there's many pros. I think in pros and cons of SolidJS, the con that I used to think of the most back in the day was that the ecosystem is just not mature. I'm going to need a router. It's not going to be type safe. I'm going to table flip. I'm going to need a framework, and then there's nothing, and I'm going to be like, okay, fine, let's just use Next.js or Quick or whatever, right? And so is that con still a con? And if not, what cons are there to using SolidJS?
I think that's not a con anymore. We've been using SolidJS at CrabNebula for 5 months now with 2 different apps, very different apps, and we haven't paid a lot of pioneering taxes on that. We haven't had to create a bunch of solutions. I do think that the biggest con in this case is the learning curve, where the thing that happens is because Solid is very strict with the fine-grained reactivity, there is a moment where you need to actually understand how the framework works in order to become productive with it. There is a little bit of exercise in that if you're not familiar with perhaps the observer pattern or something like that. But then again, it's the same for every new technology.
Yeah.
Like if you want to use TypeScript, it's gonna hurt a little bit in the beginning. Like I remember when I started with JavaScript. I remember when I started even with jQuery. Like there is a tax in learning new stuff, and SolidJS, like except for a very specific group of people, it is a new technology. So I think that would be the biggest con. Otherwise, like I think the community compensates how small they are by being extremely welcoming. Like people show up in the Discord, they start contributing, and they're very welcomed by it. Like a good example is our friend Brendan from Space Drive.
Brandonovich.
Brandonovich, yeah. I think his name's actually Brendan, but anyways.
Yeah, it's just his name.
So Brendan is like Space Drive is a big name in the Tauri ecosystem. We became friends because the work we do at CrabNebula. And he's very excited about SolidJS. And like not that long ago, I'd say, I don't know if he was in the Discord before, but at some point he became extremely active. And I'm seeing him like on every single channel and answering questions and creating migrating apps and doing stuff and a lot of stuff. And like I don't know, like when I started frequenting that Discord, he just wasn't there. So people are just very welcoming in this sense. So I think it compensates. And then every new idea you get, people get genuinely excited about it. Like we have this showcase channel, we have like the in real life meetup stuff. People get excited and contribute and make valid points.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing is there's no cons other than it's just new.
Well, yeah, I'm biased, I'd say, but yeah, they're like I think that's the one con. Like,
Okay. Nice. I want to dive into SolidStart. The last time I spoke to Ryan, he mentioned SolidStart's going away, and we're going to suggest using Astro instead. Astro with solid islands. This is your framework. Go use it. But then I spoke to you, and you're like, no, SolidStart's the thing. What happened?
So what happened is that it wasn't that he was going to suggest Solid with Astro. I think that was a misunderstanding. What he wanted to use is put Solid on top of an ecosystem that could give him the bridge for adapters on deploying different platforms. So what SolidStart would use is the Astro ecosystem in terms of the plugins and the adapters. So in whatever platform Astro could be deployed, Solid would also be able to be deployed. Then at some point they needed to pivot. I don't know exactly the reasons for it. It's something I wasn't following, but Nikhil and I cannot say his last name, I'm sorry. But Nikhil is another core member on Solid team. And Ryan got together and they decided, okay, so we need to actually do something else. So Nikhil went away and created Vinci, which is this wrapper around Nitro and Vite. So Nitro is a server runtime that's another wrapper from the Unjs community, so Unleash.js. It's a very agnostic package that ends up being used by Nuxt and used by Analog as well.
For what?
It's the server runtime. So what they do is essentially they give a Node.js server runtime and type safe because TypeScript, and it also has some roll up there because they help bundling the right code in isomorphic frameworks in this case.
Does that enable server components? Since it's a bundler.
Not by itself. We can talk about server components in SolidStart, but not by itself. At this point, there's no server components in Solid.
Okay, so Nitro is just a server that bundles. I'm not.
Nitro is a server, and it's a wrapper between H3, which would be an equivalent to Express in this case. It's a server runtime, and then within it, it has some roll up there that allows us allow people to create more declaratively the right bundle for your Node.js runtime.
Okay, and so this is used by Angular's framework analog.
Yeah.
And SolidStart and
Nuxt.
Nuxt. Okay.
Originally by Nuxt. So Nuxt team are actually the people behind Nitro, I would say.
They're just the best. I mean, they also gave us Vita, right? Just
and
genius.
VTest and a lot of
Unbelievable.
awesome stuff. Yeah. So, and then that was the thing. So they actually pivoted from Astro to Nitro in this case. And then, yeah, so then Nikhil, I think he was in his 4th attempt of creating a full stack framework or something like that.
For
So-
Solid.
Not for Solid, like he's a very prolific
Is that
developer.
what he does for fun? Like, I'm just
I
gonna
don't
make
know.
a
I think so. I think so. Yeah. Yeah. So then at this point, I said, okay, I just had enough pain and suffering and learning.
Yeah.
So I think I can do something that's agnostic, and nobody will ever need to do that again.
Nice.
So he created Vinci,
Which is the declarative way of saying use this router for this environment.
in a very Vite manner. What Vinci does is expose this create app function, where this create app function is going to receive an object as a parameter, and then an array as a parameter, and an array of objects, and then you can define multiple routers there.
Okay.
Once you do that, of course, you have specific values for them, but once you do that, it's going to go away and create the right bundles for that.
Nice.
So that enables, for example, SolidStart to have the use server directive. And then you can, within your code, get a function and you say use server on top, pretty much like Next.js
Wait,
does.
so then is this a router plus bundler combo?
It's not a router because you define the routers.
Okay. So it's a bundler.
It's a bundler with Nitro in this case.
Okay.
So it can define the server for you.
So Vinci is built on top of Nitro.
Yes.
Ah, okay, I see.
So Vinci essentially has Vite and Nitro put together.
Awesome.
And then Nitro itself has H3 and Vite as well. But anyways, what Vinci does is allow you to declaratively define your routers. And then it does all the heavy lifting for you.
Awesome.
So with that, you can have like the server actions inside SolidStart, because then you can say, okay, this piece of code actually goes into my server bundle and never lands in my client-side bundle.
You do that inside the file.
You can do that inside the file, just like server actions got famous for with Next.js. And then the other piece that I found crucial for it is Cereval, which is a very strong and fast serializer for JavaScript.
But there are other serializers for JavaScript. Why do we need another one?
So I cannot go that much into the technical details of that. That was created by Alexis. And again, I cannot say your last name. Sorry, Alexis. It's Moon6. He's from the Philippines. I cannot say the last name. But he created Servo, and then they decided to use Servo. It's extremely powerful and fast. And then that's the one they chose.
Okay. There was, I think, Super JSON, right? That's another series.
That's
I would be interested in a.
I wouldn't be able to say the difference between them. Maybe but that's definitely a question for Alexis.
We should just get Alexis on the show.
Yeah. So then you have that does the serializing part and handles the serialization boundary. And essentially that's it. So SolidStart doesn't do serializing. SolidStart doesn't do the bundle splitting, and that's how it comes to be. It uses all of them. So at some point you have, when you create, like you go like npm create solid, and then it's going to ask you a few questions. You choose SSR, you get Vinci there, but if you want to yank it out and use Webpack,
interesting,
something like that, or different server.
So SolidStart is really just, you mentioned it's like 1,500 lines of code, because it composes all this stuff together.
Today, yes. It might get bigger at some point.
What's the way, so I can literally just go create a SolidStart site right now and it will work and be production ready because it composes all these things together?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the new Solid docs that we do are actually using the very latest release. And the whole point, and SolidStart got famous for being stuck in beta for more than a year.
Yep.
And that because it went through this like very big refactoring. And the prognostic is that it's going to be a very, very short run, a better run at this point
Good.
towards stability.
You know, I have a personal experience with this. I tried to use SolidStart December of 2022. It was very difficult, and it would break. It was beta, so I was a little bit, you know, I could understand, but
Yeah.
it was frustrating, and so I ended up opening some issues. And you know, you talk about this community being super welcoming, bro. Like the people were so nice.
Yeah.
Like I just said one word, not even on GitHub. I started on Twitter, and I was just like something solid start is difficult, and then like everybody like, oh, can I help? Can I help? Can I
Yeah.
help? It was so I've never had such a warm like
Yeah.
support.
That's usually how it go, and it's incredible. I don't know how they do it, because now there's another core member that does it. Alexis does that a lot as well, but Ryan is everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you open SolidJS on Reddit, Ryan's there answering questions.
And then Hacker News, and then LinkedIn, and then
And he's everywhere, and he answers like even the most basic questions, like questions that anybody in the community would be able to answer. Like he goes there and answers, and it's not like a two-liner.
yeah.
He answers you like 4 paragraphs worth of answers, and it's like very detailed, and he's like he has this very long live streams.
Yeah.
He just goes for hours talking about his decisions and stuff like that. I heard about somebody at some point on Twitter said, or X said, "Oh, I think having accessors is no, what? Yeah, I think it was about accessor. I think having accessors was a bad idea. We should abstract that away." And then somebody said, "Oh, we thought that, and then we forked Solid, and then after 3 months working with our fork, we decided to go back because that was not a good call."
Interesting.
And that's just testament for how much thought he puts on stuff, and he's very open about the things. Like he wanted to build a better router. He went all on with Tenor, builder of 10 stack router. Had him on live stream at least twice that I remember of. So and he's very clear about that, and he's very clear about like some APIs he brings from different frameworks, and this is how they do, and it's incredible.
I remember we were at a conference, you, me, and Ryan, and man, the guy. I don't mean what I'm about to say in any disparaging way at all, but Ryan has no off switch.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Like
I love that.
For 12 hours nonstop, just talking to people. And so like we were there at BJS, I think it was last year, React Brussels, or it was BJS. And we're just we're hiking. We climbed up a hill, and we took the stairs all the way up. And dude, I kid you not, like we go up there, and off in the background you'll hear fine grained reactivity signals effects. It's like, but like this is hard. We're hiking. I think that's another testament to how committed Ryan is. And really, we both work in DevRel, dude. Ryan is the GOAT of DevRel. I think this is really an understatement. Okay, let's talk about CrabNebula in a bit, but before we do, one last question about Solid. Greenfield projects. Solid's great for that. I assume your work at CrabNebula is mostly greenfield. There's of course the migration story. So I'm coming from React, I'm coming from Angular, I'm coming from Vue. I imagine migrating from React may not be so hard because it's JSX and it's so close in syntax. However, every state read would have to be replaced with a function call. In the ecosystem, has anyone attempted to do that? If somebody listening to this episode wants to go migrate their React into Solid, what would you tell them?
I know about people who are doing that or who are attempting that. I think that might be the big problem we need to solve in the SolidDX team. So this year, because I feel that once SolidStart goes stable and people start hearing about that and seeing how easy it has become to use it, they're going to try to use it a little bit more, and they're going to, like, at some point, like, from what I see in DevRel, what happens is you get awareness, then you get slight adoption from individual developers in POCs and side projects and stuff, and then either people are able to bring them to the day-to-day job, or the interest just dries out.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be a solution, a question that we are going to have to answer in terms of the X team. So what's the migration story? I've had people asking me that. saying, look, you convinced me, I'm going to use Solid. How do I do that? I have this huge app with React. How do I do that? I said, look, man, I don't have a straight answer. It's not clear to me. So this is an important question for us. Like we get up to just so far with a similar syntax and with people knowing the two frameworks. Then there's gonna be another story about, I don't know, Codemods or compatibility libraries or whatever.
Yeah.
So this is a question we still need to answer.
Interesting.
I'd
Is
say.
there work around some type of code mod? Because like for very trivial apps, it's a matter of replacing an identifier with a function call expression.
Yep.
And it's replacing instances of use state with create signal.
Yeah.
For very trivial apps. I mean, use effect, use memo, all that probably will require more, but it's, if you zoom out, it's just replacing some identifiers and it should just work.
Yeah.
So has there been talk of that? Is there an RFC or something?
Not that I know of, no. It is definitely like, and we mentioned Greenfield, if you are an open source developer and you're interested in Solid, and you have experience with ASTs and stuff like that, Codemods, that's a very greenfield that everybody's gonna be welcoming towards. Like actually there's another one, even if you don't wanna touch this like part of like between different frameworks, like Solid Router just had a big API change. And some people got confused because like 1/3 of the API is gone, and then there's a lot of extra features.
Wow.
So people are like, okay, and there's all good reason for it. Like there are a lot, all APIs that had a huge risk of being misused or that prove with the new features to be obsolete and stuff like that. So it was a good change. We were able to migrate the DevTools app in CrabNebula in 3 hours. I live streamed that. But
you live streamed the whole thing, like start to finish?
yeah,
Wow.
it was less than 3 hours actually. It was 1 hour and something, and I actually got stuck at some point for some stupid typo. But yeah, it was about a 1 hour effort. So it was, but it was like a very, like I would say, quote unquote, simple app. There are like, if you were using some more like some specific features, it might get harder to migrate. But there are a lot of migration stories that could be solved with a code mod between 0.9 and 0.10 in the Solid Router. So that's a good place where if you just want to come in and join the community with a bank, that's a nice thing to do.
You know, this is the basis of my friendship with Kent C. Dodds.
Yeah, yes. Well, I know that, but tell the story. It's a great story.
He had this library, Glamorous, and out of nowhere, so we were using it at work in 2016, and suddenly he's deprecating this thing, and he said, everybody go use Emotion. But there were slight differences, like maybe the Solid Router 0.9 to 0.10, that level of difference. And I was with Fabienne, actually. Yeah, I think I was with Fabienne. And I said, man, I don't want to do this migration. It's going to be Fabienne, by the way, for those listening, I'm getting just like lost in our friendship. Fabienne is one of my best friends and really one of our coworkers and the best, one of the best engineers I've ever worked with ever in my life.
And he loves to nose dive in a rabbit hole.
Yeah, he's on X and LinkedIn. He's at Fabienne0102. Fabienne, Fabien 0102. February 1st, his birthday. Anyway, so I said, I have to now rename all these things and so on. He was like, no, just try to code mod. And I said, but I don't know how. And he's like, yeah, okay, you have the internet. And so sure, I learned compiler theory. I learned code mods. I learned Babel. I used Babel to write it. I wrote this code mod, open sourced it. A few months later, went to Utah.js. Kent was there, and I was like, but before this, I published this thing, and he came to me and he was like, oh, you wrote the code mod? Yeah, and that's it went from there. So I think there's room, it sounds like, for somebody to do that for Solid. I would love to explore that, actually. I probably don't have the time, but man, if somebody starts that project, I would watch that like a hawk, because it seems so close. Anyway, okay. Good to know. Room for improvement there, or room for addition there, I guess. Let's pivot, talk about CrabNebula. I'm excited about this. I've been working with CrabNebula as a consultant for a while, almost a year now. Actually, 11 months exactly today at the time of recording. Wild. And I know CrabNebula well. Our listeners don't, so you get the luxury of telling everyone about it. If you can maybe summarize CrabNebula just in a nutshell, and then we'll go into the details from there.
So CrabNebula is a company of a lot of with a very big open source heart that people came together around Tauri essentially. And when Tauri got a lot of attention, they created a company called CrabNebula, not Tauri, I mean this group of people, and to help the ecosystem. So it's a company that very genuinely tries to give back in terms of open source projects, and they try to nurture the Tauri ecosystem a lot. But not only Tauri ecosystem, we mentioned Daniel, the CEO, he actually is one of the biggest motivators, and he's just he encourages a lot the work I do for Solid, for example. He cheers for it, he supports it a lot, not only with letting us experiment in CrabNebula, but also by participating in discussions in Twitter, Discord, and bridging conversations. So that's the gist of CrabNebula, I would say. We can talk a little bit about the offerings, I guess.
Yeah, I want to do that. You mentioned Tauri multiple times. For the listeners, what is Tauri?
So Tauri is this framework for creating hybrid and native apps with, you can do that with web technology in this case. So Tauri is written in Rust. So what it does, it has two components, one called Tau, the other called Rai. Tau is the window management system that's fully Rust, and then Rai is a Rust wrapper on the native web view of your system. This means that you can create a hybrid app, essentially a whole web app, if you have single page application, any kind of single page application.
So it doesn't matter about the framework. It could be Solid, or Angular.
From vanilla JavaScript to Quick, you can bring whatever you want. And what's gonna do then, it's gonna render that in this web view. That's the native system web view. And then it allows the IPC layer to connect with the native APIs from your system.
Whoa. IPC layer, native APIs, what are we talking about?
So what happens is that you can essentially, in layman terms, your web code can talk to your system code. So if I can send a push notification, that's going to be your native system push notification. I can go through your file system if you allow me to do that.
From the web app.
From within the web app. I can call, I can use a function invocation that's going to, from the web app, connect to the Rust backend, sort of, in very big air quotes. The Rust backend, and then the Rust is going to talk to the native code in your system and call the right appropriate APIs. That allows you to have, because all these wrappers in web views and using native code with Rust, it allows Tauri to have a very, very minimal binary bundle. So essentially, a Tauri Hello World app can go something from 300 kilobytes plus your JavaScript bundle.
Wow.
And
what's a normal non-Tauri Hello World app like that?
I think the most famous one is Electron, and I think the Hello World Electron, because it bundles Chromium and Node.js, it goes for 500 megs.
500 megs?
I would guess.
Half a gigabyte for Hello World.
I would say so. So there's a lot of trade-offs on that, and it's not a dig on Electron in any way. I'm just pointing out how good Tauri can be in this case if you're into that lean build. So that's one of the things that Tauri allows.
Wait, can I sorry to interrupt, but can I just summarize what you said? So you drew the parallel between Tauri and Electron as being ways to build hybrid desktop apps with web technology.
Yeah.
You mentioned Rai is the web view thing, right?
Yeah.
So Rai uses a web view. It's not it's different from a browser because every operating system has like
Yeah.
a way of rendering HTML, CSS, JavaScript,
Yeah.
a web view. So it uses the OS's web view, and then Tau is a Rust backend
Yeah.
that Rai talks to, and this is Tauri. It connects
Yeah.
those two, and so you can, from your like React app, pass a message to Tau to execute like a push notification. That's what you said. Right?
Yeah, you can literally do await, and then I've totally forgot the name of the API now, but essentially await function. If you're gonna do a method you created in Rust, you can await, invoke, and then pass a string as a parameter, and that string is the name of the function you define in Rust.
Okay.
And
Is
you
that
can,
type safe?
that can be type safe because there's a package called Tauri Specta,
Okay.
which is based on Specta that I already mentioned his name before, Brendan. He's from Space Drive. They're big in Tauri. So Brendan and Oscar and the Space Drive team has a package called Specta that creates TypeScript types from Rust code.
What?
Yes.
Wow.
So if you can just, with a one-liner, you can generate types for all your Rust, TypeScript types for all your Rust invocation that you want to expose to your APIs.
Okay. So that's the difference. And then Electron is bigger, and this is again not disparaging of Electron, it's just numbers. And again, we talked earlier about how it doesn't matter. Use what floats your boat, right? You make money however you want, whatever. So Electron is bigger because it doesn't just use the native OS web view. It is Chromium, which is heavy, and it doesn't have a Rust backend because it's Node.js.
Yeah.
It bundles Node.js.
Yeah.
So it's this big bundle that's your JavaScript plus a browser plus a Node.js. Okay. And Tauri is just like, I don't want any of that.
Yeah.
And the trade-off then, I assume, is you have to know Rust if you want to write backend code in Tauri.
So yes and no.
Like you can't just do like fs.read file in JavaScript to interact with the file system.
You can, and for this particular example, there is API that Tauri exposes. So you could do a native FS call from the JavaScript that goes through Rust.
What?
Because Tauri has this package for the APIs, so you can. There's a very big number of APIs that Tauri just exposes to it. So what you can do is essentially any FS call if you're a Node.js developer. It's quite equivalent in this case to the FS package in Node.js. You can do any of that.
Wow.
So I have this like simple app that I created to learn particular Tauri in Rust. Pulsar, yes. So it's a file system scanner. So what I do is you define like a scope for that app to run, and it's gonna go through all the folders, all the directories in that particular scope. Go find any, in this case, node modules, and go through each one of those node modules, benchmark the size, and comes back with a sum. Can you imagine how long that would take in Node.js?
Yeah, pretty long.
So what I do then is this particular crawler that goes inside the node modules, we had to write a method in Rust from scratch. So I wasn't able to write that. I wrote, I think, the first implementation of it myself. And then we had this colleague that's basically a human compiler called Jonas Krukenberg.
Yeah, Jonas Crookie on X.
Yes. So we had this offsite, CrabNebula offsite. I sat with him and said, dude, what can I do?
Yeah.
And he said, man, you're just trying to tackle like asynchronous code in Rust. Give me that. Because it's too hard for you right now.
Was it a hold my beer type of situation?
So he just grabbed it, went away for, I don't know, 2 hours, came back, and then called Fabian again.
Fabian.
And then we just sat and he just explained the code, and we just mob programmed that. And so essentially what happens is my test was in my code. I have the fork of Astro Docs, SolidJS. I had all these big library frameworks there. I was able to benchmark my entire node modules in about 15 seconds.
What? Like in your computer or
in my computer?
Oh my goodness!
Because Rust, and again, that's live streamed as well, and that's also live. And it's like the front end layer is SolidJS. There's actually a very nice. Actually, the app I took my live stream with Ryan Carniato,
Okay.
where I had the experience a SolidJS developer can have, which was Ryan Carniato commenting and changing my SolidJS code.
Didn't feel overwhelming at all.
No, not at all. I just at that point I just realized, okay, I'm not gonna be embarrassed by anything. Move whatever you want, whatever, and it's like, yeah, this is wrong, this is wrong, this could be better. But that was awesome.
It's like writing an exam when your teacher is like right there.
Yeah. If your teacher invented a subject. But anyways, yeah. So what I did, I had to create this one method, all the others. So getting the scope, storing the scope in your JavaScript, sending the scope, asking for deleting the file, deleting the directory, and so on. All those, I didn't write in Rust. I was just await name of the method. Because Tauri is exposing the typical native APIs, and they're all type safe.
So did you then benchmark the JavaScript version against the Tauri version? Against the Rust version?
I didn't get to write a JavaScript version for that app. We could, though.
That would be
as an
so
exercise.
valuable. Yeah. And then you can be like, here's the use case, Rust.
Yep.
Because again, there's a lot of skeptics. I keep going back to the skeptics who will go like, okay, but why? Why? And you know, I've been known to add to this narrative a little bit, where I do get frustrated sometimes when everybody comes and feels the need to tell me that they rewrote something that was mostly fine in Rust. I don't know why. I rewrote my serializer. I rewrote my archiver, the thing to unzip. I rewrote my image compressor. Like, okay, cool, man. Do you have a life though? Like, sometimes it gets quite difficult to listen to. I appreciate that people, you know, they want to, like you said, they want to flex their brain muscle and grow. But I'm a bit torn about it, because at some point you're like, okay, as an individual growth exercise, awesome. As a business thing that will help you with, I don't know, adoption or marketing, I think that's somewhat that's somewhat dangerous territory. Anyway, my point being, I think your example with JavaScript versus Rust would just be the definitive, like, here, this is why.
Yeah, but then again, that would be me writing my quote-unquote pedestrian JavaScript, because as you know, there's this guy, a friend of ours, called Michele Riva.
Yeah, the best.
He wrote this library called Orama, and he had built a company around it.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, sorry, Michele, if that's a lie, but that's the fastest search engine
in the world,
in the web.
Yeah.
And he wrote that in JavaScript. His point being, Node.js is not slow.
Yeah.
We can write extremely performant Node.js. Why he chose Node.js, that's a question for him. The thing is, I'm pretty sure if he writes the algorithm to do that file scanner, he's going to write way faster than I would. The point is, I think there's one, maybe two Michele Rivas around.
Yeah, exactly.
So the thing is, Rust is fast by default, but and allows, and then again, my first implementation of Rust of that algorithm was way slower than the one that Jonas did.
Yeah.
And then after learning with Jonas, I got to a close performance than he did, but then he made it better anyways. So there are different degrees of JavaScript, different degrees of Rust.
Which is why I think a great thing that I'd love to see, and I think CrabNebula should do, is take your Pulsar as it is. It has the fast Jonas Rust thing probably now, but add like 3 variants: one with pedestrian JavaScript, one with Michele Riva JavaScript, and one with pedestrian Rust.
Yeah.
I would love to see that, because that would then show you the full spectrum. And I wonder if we can then test the hypothesis that even at its fastest, JavaScript is still slower than Rust at its slowest.
Yeah, and there's also the other thing that Rust is safe by default as well. Like, if my code compiled in Rust, it's gonna work. I can throw whatever I want there, it's gonna work. If my code runs in JavaScript, Doesn't mean it's gonna work
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
So there's also a lot to say about choosing Rust for an app that's gonna connect to your user's system.
Right.
And Tauri has privacy and security very deep into their core, and that to me is it's good to know that, because as a dev rel works with Tauri,
Yeah.
what I like to do essentially is you have this Tauri config JSON where you have a disallow list inside, and you can define the scope, which APIs of the system you need to use in your app, and the scope you're going to give them. So I can say I'm going to use file system, and I'm only going to give the TMP folder, for example. So
that's awesome. So you can give like per folder access,
and
it's closed by default.
Yeah, and you can give like you have some specific keywords where you can say the $app, which is the folder where the app's running, or document, which is the whatever. So what I like to do is essentially having everything turned off by default, and then I start developing, and then at some point my app just breaks.
Yeah.
I look at the console, it says that API is not allowed, and it says the name of the API, it says where I need to put the permission.
Nice.
So that also works with CSPs. You can define a CSP for your app, because
content security policy.
Yeah, content security policy. You can, for example, you can freeze prototypes.
Wow.
You can say my JavaScript prototypes are not allowed to be changed.
Wow.
So then if you use a library that has a leak that's changing a prototype, your app's gonna break.
Wow.
And fail whatever security audit. So that allowed a lot of developers using Tauri to pinpoint security issues they had.
Yeah.
And that's not active effort on the behalf of the developer. Developer is just, doing that.
Right.
So the only good choice they made was using Tauri in this case. So I like this thing, and that's something that's empowered by Rust, because as we know, because we've been in this career for a while, JavaScript is easy to abuse.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it's not just JavaScript, but Node.js is just open.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want. fs dot whatever, and it executes as the current user. And so if it's my file system and my directory, I can just delete everything. In fact, I have. I once just ran rimraf and then just deleted everything. And it didn't even go to trash. Like, it was an actual delete.
Yeah.
And Rust would probably not let me do that. And that's also Dino's reason for existence, right? As you take Node.js, make it more secure. But Rust is not only secure, but it's also not garbage collected. So it's manually, semi-manually.
Which language is Dino built on top of?
TypeScript. Rust.
Rust.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So Node is C++, Dino is Rust.
Yeah, wild. I had never made that connection until just now. Okay, so CrabNebula is the company that came out of Tauri. I'm assuming because open source is unsustainable. We should probably talk about that on a separate episode. But how do they make money? What do they offer?
So CrabNebula started as this consultancy agency. So they do security audits and a lot of work around the Tauri. So they employ a lot of Tauri developers, part of the Tauri working group. So there's usually companies that use Tauri and they want to sponsor a feature, for example. And then if that feature is aligned with the roadmap or the intentions of the Tauri working group, CrabNebula would be inclined to take that and then implement this feature and teach the company to use that, or even implement for the company as well. Then about I think a little bit before I joined, CrabNebula started creating products. So the first product that we launched is called DevTools, which is essentially what the browser developer tools is for web developers. We want to create something like that for Tauri developers.
This is because Tauri apps are not shipping with Chromium, so you don't get the Chromium DevTools. You don't have any DevTools.
And yes, and it's also hard to debug like the system part of it. So in this case, you can benchmark even your Rust code.
Oh, cool.
I know a guy that implemented a very nice IPC waterfall where you can see kind of the network requests, and you can time them, and it already helped us. Like, by the way, if you're listening to this, the guy I'm talking is Tejas.
Was me. I did that.
So this IPC waterfall, for example, what happens is Jonas was pairing with somebody from the Tauri community, and they said, look, there is this weird system call we're doing that's taking like random intervals, or it's taking longer than it should. You should debug that. So that already helped in this case.
Just to clarify, this thing that I built, the IP, I didn't build it single-handedly. There's a team. I helped. I wrote most of the code, but what it solves is in your Chrome DevTools, you have a network tab that you can see network requests as a waterfall. With this, you don't see network requests, but you see requests between the Rust backend and the operating system. And the cool thing here is you see also the communication between all your dependencies and the operating system as well. So you see this, and it's a bit more complex than the network waterfall because it's time sliced, right? Like CPUs, what they do is they switch context. So it'll do like 10% of a task, go do something else, come back. And so you can see pauses in between. You can't do this in Chrome DevTools for network because network requests aren't like that. So it's like the network view in Chrome DevTools, but it's for memory.
It's a combination of the profiler tab and the network tab in this case. So I think the difference, and that's something that we actually had a long conversation about when we were defining this feature, was who would use that? Would people like debugging would use, or people profiling? Because there are two different kinds of users when you go DevTools. You're either trying to find a problem or you're trying to identify how your app behaves. And in this case, it looks very similar to the network waterfall, but it's really good for profiling and improving. Another feature that we have was to inspect like the configuration. As I mentioned, there's a lot of declarative configuration in Tauri. And what we do essentially is providing in the DevTools a very user-friendly view of that. And we're going to provide insights in the very near future where you can optimize that. You can, with a very small tweak in your configuration, you can reduce the bundle size by a lot. You can define some optimizations for your release bundle and reduce your binaries significantly. So that's what the DevTools is about. That's the first product.
But wait, is it free? Is it open source? Because like the whole company started because open source is not sustainable.
Yes.
Chrome DevTools, the closest comparison we have, is free. Because Chrome is free. Is this free?
At this moment, it's entirely free. What's going to happen is companies need to make money to stay afloat. Somebody needs to pay my salary, Tejas' salary to work on this and make it better, and the rest of the team's salary. So what happens?
And they have very high salaries.
Not high enough, some would argue.
Indeed. Could be higher. Yeah.
So the thing is, we're gonna create features that eventually are gonna also incur costs, and that means we're gonna have this premium version. But there is a model that we want to maintain as free for use.
So it's freemium.
Yes, I would say that model is freemium. Not in the case there will be ads in it, but yeah.
Can you sorry. You imagine Chrome? You open your Chrome DevTools and it's like, first watch this ad. Oh
yeah, that's the DevTools, and that's the model. So at this moment, it is entirely a solid single page application.
Wow.
And it's gonna use then and then it connects to your Rust app, to your app. I mean, what happens is that we have a plugin called DevTools. It's a Rust crate that you add to your Tauri. It's a few, I wouldn't say it's one line of code, maybe it's 3, but anyways, it's very small config. And then with that, it connects to your Rust app and it takes a lot of metrics. And from that, you can have like this stream of benchmarks that we're going to collect, like console log, all your IPC waterfalls, as we mentioned, and a bunch of stuff that we plan to improve on.
Awesome. So that's out, right? I built
Yeah.
the website. It's out.
Yes.
When is V2 coming, or this paid? Should people brace themselves to start losing money? When are the paid features showing up? What's the plan with that?
It's gonna come in March.
Okay.
So the plan for that is
Which it may be after March when we publish this episode. Maybe not. We'll see. Yeah.
So yeah, it's coming soon. It's coming this first quarter for sure. And a lot of the features we're also planning for it is to support also Tauri V2, which it's something that's worth mentioning. Tauri is reaching V2. That means it's gonna add also mobile builds. So Tauri has mobile support, a bunch with other nice features. One of them that I'm particularly excited about is being able to have multiple web views in the Tauri app.
Oh, cool. This will then allow the DevTools to be literally
a drawer, just like the DevTools.
Nice.
I've seen some proof of concepts and some stuff that Lucas, a guy in our company,
co-founder of Tauri,
co-founder of Tauri,
co-founder of CrabNebula,
and genius on the side, made a few. He's the one working on that. There's nobody better than him to work on that, and I saw that working. And it's awesome. So, anyways, there's a lot of stuff we're planning to do for the premium and add some features. So, yeah, basically it's coming soon.
Awesome.
With Tauri V2, I'd say before Tauri, around Tauri V2.
So CrabNebula has been doing security audits, some feature building, consulting, offers products like DevTools. Awesome. That sounds really great. What else does Crab? Are there more products in the pipeline?
There are. Should we talk about that?
I don't know.
Okay.
If you're NDA bound, we don't have to.
I mean, it's public knowledge at this point, I guess, that there's CrabNebula Cloud coming out, which is it's gonna streamline, because we know how shipping apps can be hard.
Yeah.
So what's gonna do, it's gonna allow you to distribute your apps on very smoothly.
Right.
And I can say very smoothly with without any arrogance, because that's not the team that I'm working at. So I can say it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
How
Nice.
they're doing it. Yeah, that's very close to general availability. I'd say we are starting to onboard some selected people to help us like identify edges, rough edges, and corners to address. But yeah, it's
Awesome.
been working.
Awesome. And I think we're probably a little bit NDA bound there, so we can just tell people to wait and watch. Right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so some products. I assume there's probably going to be more products at some point. That sounds really great. I also heard that CrabNebula does the Tauri audits, the security audits, right?
Yeah.
And I heard that they also do audits for other people.
Yeah.
I don't mean other companies that pay for audits, just like casually just go audit the web just for
Yeah.
curiosity. I think that's really awesome, actually, because I know, so Tillman is the guy in charge of security. He will do audits, and then if he finds something, will tell people, hey, listen, I just found this.
And it's really cool because he audits everything we use.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, Linear, for example, we use Linear, and he audited and he found like a small, not sure if it's small or critical or whatever, like what level. He found one and they patched it.
Wow, really?
Yeah,
awesome.
that's so I need to ask him if we're allowed to say that publicly. You might need to edit that out, but yeah, he finds issues on stuff that we use and then he patches it, and he's involved everywhere. Like, for example, DevTools, before we launch, he had to audit the DevTools.
So we can say it is secure.
It is secure.
As can be.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Like, but Tillman's not the only one. There's like other people in the team. And yeah, as you mentioned, CrabNebula is the one auditing Tauri V2. So the release process of Tauri is the features, the roadmap is defined, and then they go and create an alpha version. And then after testing and whatever, they consider the features mature, it goes towards beta. Then a security audit starts to make sure that it's secure. Once that happens, it goes into a release candidate. And then you have a last batch of tests, and then it goes stable. So technically, once Tauri reaches beta, you can consider their features to be stable. So there's not going to be big changes on APIs. And then there's the security audits.
Awesome. That sounds like a lot to do. I'm excited to see how things develop. If somebody is also excited, listening to the podcast, where can they find out more about DevTools, cloud, etc.?
I would recommend them to go to our CrabNebula Discord. So there's a link in the website. It's CrabNebula.dev.
Crab because Rust.
Yes. And or if they're already in the Tauri Discord, there is a hashtag CrabNebula. It's a channel there where you can find pretty much all of us. So yeah, that's the best way to engage. There's also the X and LinkedIn accounts where Eleftheria, a coworker of ours, does a great job creating threads and disseminating knowledge. So if you are a JavaScript developer specifically and want to learn Rust and don't know how to start, I suggest just give CrabNebula a follow and watch the threads because she's putting amazing content.
Awesome. Wow. Okay, we covered so much. Let's wrap up. I want to give you an opportunity. We've covered a lot of things. I mean, we covered SolidJS, ecosystem team, Vinci, Nitro, the details, the pros, the cons, React, documentation. Gosh. And then we covered CrabNebula and all of this. From all of this discussion and probably what you've been thinking about the past few days, if you could condense all of that into one takeaway, one statement, one idea, one protocol for people listening, what would that be?
I think I think that the gist of this is being open-minded to new stuff. I think all of those things we talked about, I wasn't very much into them like a year or a year and a half ago. All of that we're all been learning, and that's I think the beauty of this career we chose, that things just change way too fast and it's so nice and you can just reinvent yourself at any point. So yeah, learn new stuff, flex your brain muscles, and if tech gets you excited, that's good.
Awesome, Attila. I've been looking forward to this for literal months, and it was everything I've hoped for and more. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast, for giving a gift to me and to all the listeners. It's super valuable, and I can't wait for the next time.
I love to be here. I want to watch their episodes you record.
Awesome, thank you.
It's amazing.
Thank you for joining my discussion with Atila Fassina. I hope you found it as enjoyable and insightful as I did. I hope you learned about SolidJS, the project, the ecosystem, SolidStart, the community with Ryan Carniato and how welcoming it is. And we hope you have some takeaways that you can use in your everyday work. We also hope you enjoyed learning about CrabNebula, Tauri, building desktop apps with Rust, and indeed why Rust may be faster, why Rust is indeed faster. We look forward to seeing the results of the experiment we discussed, and so on. If you're learning from and or enjoying this podcast, I'd invite you to show some support at zero cost. So you could leave a rating up to 5 stars wherever you're listening to this, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. You can also consider leaving a comment of guests you'd like to have on, topics you'd like to see covered, some mix of them, and we'd be sure to get back to you. I do read all of the comments. This podcast, once again, is made possible by its sponsors. If you'd like to sponsor the podcast, feel free to send an email to podcast@tejas.qa, and we'll get in touch. Thank you for joining, thank you for your time, and most importantly, thank you for your interest in code.